What up? What up? It's your boy H2O, your potential conditioner, and welcome back to another episode of the New Balance podcast. Man, it's so good to be with you on today, and it's so good to be just in the land of the living. 2022 is off like a rocket. And if you're listening to this, if you're watching, this, I'm gonna encourage you to buckle your seatbelt and hold on for dear life. Um, it's moving fast, but it's moving fast in such great ways, good ways. And today, I don't want to. We'll talk more on the end. I have my sister on. I want to get right to the business of today. New Balance podcast. Show some love for my sister, Miss Victoria Dominique. What's up, VD? What's up, sis? How you doing?
Hello, hello. What's up, fam?
Yes, that's right. That's right. We definitely are family. I'm so glad to have Victoria on with me. She and I are friends, and we've been chopping it up. We've been like in the Shark Tank, if you will, um, talking some things. And if you rock with this podcast, you follow us, I'm all about partnerships. I'm all about building bridges. I'm all about community. And this young lady on today is definitely all of those things. We started a new series titled Life After Death. Um, Unfortunately, it's not one of the greatest things about life, but death is a natural part of life. And if you live long enough, the transition that will happen, is going to happen through death. I know many times we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to think about it, address it. But if you live life, it's important. If death hasn't happened yet, I want to encourage you to sit down, talk about it, or talk to people who have experienced it. Right, it will help you out in the long run. There is a pain that comes along with death, but the pain that comes along with it, it should not be. It's not designed to knock you out. It's not designed for you to stop living. Right, and so many friendships, so many relationships, people who have experienced death, they have just stopped living. They've shut down. They've just stopped. And what we want to do this month is we want to give you some practical, just some practical steps, and then really just encourage you. Sometimes you just need someone to be there to uplift you. Um, it's all about knowing sometimes, if does anybody see me where I am, right? And so all of these different things that are associated with it, is so important, just to have somebody to walk it with you, until you come out of it. And so on today, there'll probably be a myriad of things that I'll touch, but um, my sis is on, Victoria. First, before we even jump into the podcast, tell everybody hello, Victoria, and tell us what's going on with you, sis.
Hello, everybody. Like you said, I'm Victoria Dominique, author, teacher, mother, worshiper, um, child of God. You know, that's me. I've been teaching for, this is probably year 11. Um, I'm a mother, 5-year-old Jackson, a single mom, and we're thriving and surviving at the same time. Worship leader, have been doing that since I was about 5 years old. And, you know, just a heavy emphasis on worship and ministry in my life. Um, and also an author, a new author, released my first book last year, Motivated Millennial Moms, the 7 F words every mom should know.
Let's go.
So
Let's
that's a
go.
celebration. So yeah, just stepping out on faith, um, stepping onto some dead dreams, reawaken some dry bones and all those things. And it's been a journey. This marks the 1 year anniversary of me writing the book, the month of February. So yeah, very symbolic moment right now. And it's Black History Month. So there's so many things going on. Right. Yes, yes. Black girl magic, all those things.
I got it.
I'm representing Whitney today. I have my Whitney sweatshirt on. So that's me in a nutshell.
Oh, incredible, incredible. We're gonna delve into some of those areas on today. Um, you said something um, about being a worshiper, worship leader, um, and we know God has called us to live a life of worship.
Mhm.
That is going to be so critical in your coming out of when you deal with death, like your worship.
Mhm.
And I think it's a hidden gem that many of us don't even use. Um, I'm not knocking other methods of how to grieve, but one of the ways um, to help you get through the grieving process, and we see this in the life of David. David was a worshiper, and David had his share of death. David had his share of ups and downs, but we see him worship his way through. I think part of God calling him a man after his own heart was David had a desire to just be right with God. He never wanted to lose God's presence. That's a hard thing. And when you know that worship is a it's not just a it's just not an act that we do, but it's a lifestyle. And when you think about the disconnect that happens when someone dies that you love, it's a disconnect that happens. We worship out of this love affair that we have with God. So when that love is broken, the first thing that you dare not do is like, I don't want to worship. I don't feel like worshiping because the death is so heavy on you. But worship is like the dew in the morning. It when it
Mhm.
it it comes to refresh you, it comes to rejuvenate you, it comes to restart you. So we'll delve into that a little later. But I heard that when you were talking about being a worshiper. Um, well, obviously, you being on here, you've experienced loss, you've experienced death in your life, and what we want to do is we kind of want to, I guess we'll start there. We'll just talk about some of the deaths in your family, and I think this episode, I think, was really unique about you. This whole month, we'll be talking about different types of death, but I think the other death that we really have to take a look at and then learn how to process it. We are in a season where there's a transition of generations that are leaving us, right?
Mhm.
Those patriarchs, those who have taught us, trained us, nurtured us. There are a lot of them are going off the scene. So it is something for family members, relationship, business relationships, in ministries. Um, it's a transition of thoughts and feelings and all of those different things. So if you could kind of just start there, Victoria, just talking about some of the loved ones that have um, passed and just how you dealt with it and how you had to find yourself getting back to life after those deaths occurred.
Mhm. Yeah. I was born in the shadow of death, and I'll explain that. My mom was 4 months pregnant with me when my dad passed away from an aneurysm on his brain. And, when I was born, I didn't know what I was born into as a baby, but my mom always described me as a happy baby. I have a little picture over here, a little dusty on it, but me as a baby, I was a happy little baby. I was loved and
Incredible.
well taken care of. But there came a time when my mom did inform me that my dad passed away. I think I was probably like 5. Didn't really understand it, but I had my uncle, her brother stepped in, my dad's brother, his baby brother stepped in, and my grandfather on my dad's father. So, men stepped in. And throughout my life, I've cultivated this relationship with these men that I kind of put together like a 3-in-1 to make like my dad. I didn't know who he was, I didn't know how he was. But in some ways, I was like, that's good because I can make him to be whoever I wanted him to be. And through stories, I was able to get to know him. And through my grandmother and my grandfather. Fast forward 35 years later, 2021, my grandmother and my grandfather, my dad's parents, both passed away last year. And so, the relationship on that side of the family didn't come quite as naturally because I was raised by my mother. But the wonderful thing is my mother and my grandparents and my uncle, my dad's brother, they made sure that I would go over there on Christmases and Thanksgivings and just random sleepovers. And so I know my cousins and I know my family. Could it have been better? Probably, yeah. Could have, especially as I got older and the ball, that was the first shift. Once I got older, my mom and my grandmother, they all made sure they were the ones that nurtured that relationship. And so when I got in college, my mom was like, "Did you call your grandmother? Did you call your dad, your grandfather?" And I'm like, yeah. And as I got older, I realized that responsibility to keep that relationship going was on me, on us. They're getting older. You can't just depend on grandma and papa to call you. Like, you have to call them now, and you have to be a little bit more proactive. So the later years of her life and their life, that's what I was doing, like kind of trying to foster that relationship. My uncle, my dad's brother, passed away in 2000 and I want to say 18. He was shot in front of his home. And so this was my grandparents' second son that they had lost. And the second man in my life that I had lost, that I value very dearly because he was the next best thing to my father. And him and my father were like this. And so he was shot in his driveway. And that was tough. That was really tough because that was my connection to that family. He was really the one that would come get me, and I would spend the night, and he made sure I knew people. And when I was at the family reunions, this Victor's daughter, and this, just giving me history, and people, "Oh, you look like your dad," and all those things. So it was tough when he passed away. And so this year when Granny and Papa passed away, it was like, oh, that's it. Those were my connections to that side of the family, which was a lie once I realized that I have a plethora of other aunties and great uncles and great, And so now there's a shift where I have to be even more in control of those relationships and in tune for my son and for myself. That's a whole family that I can't neglect. Like, that's a whole support system. That's a whole connection network of people that love me and love us. And so with the passing of that, with my grandfather and also my grandmother, and previously my my uncle, it just kind of prepared me to say, okay, now it's me, my brothers. I had two half brothers because my dad had two sons before me, and the cousins. Like, it's up to us. We started a group text where we kind of check in with each other. Hey, how you doing? Because those people who did that aren't here. The people who planned the family reunions are not going to plan them. So who's going to plan them? That's just been my recent experience with death. But I feel like one of my godmother told me, you were born in a sad time. And so I remember her saying that to me when I was younger, and I didn't really know what that meant, but I know now. And I think my birth for my family was almost a reminder of God's grace, because I was the last thing that my dad left for my grandparents. I was the last thing.
Incredible. Wow, you shared a few things I definitely did not know, but I think is worthy of unpacking for the listener. When you talked about your uncle, who basically is a surrogate father, right? Um, the emotion of not him just being a surrogate father, but how he's a surrogate father, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you, in essence, you can look at it from this standpoint as though it's, even though he's a surrogate father, this is my daddy, right? Because you said
Mm-hmm.
you took those other relationships and you said your father, right? You made a father.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think if you're watching, listening, however the
I
relationship,
forgot. I
go
forgot
ahead.
one piece though.
No, go right
The
ahead.
Heavenly Father. I feel horrible. I have to add this though. I did have, because of my mom's mom, I had a close relationship with God. So I took those three and my relationship with God, and I made, those are the people that I consulted when I needed, especially a earthly male perspective on things. Yeah,
Mhm.
those were the people. And then of course my Heavenly Father, like very dependent on those sources.
Absolutely. No, that's it. No, and that's how you do it. It's look, it's I said it's a hybrid. It's a hybrid. It's a hybrid of it. Like you have to. I think that's good. Like for the life side, think about this. You found out when you were a young girl that your dad, passed away
Mm-hmm.
um, before you were even born, and depending on what that looks like, see, it can be it can be it can be your perception of how you're going to go through life with
Yep.
um, the information that's given to you. So
Mm-hmm.
since we're here, I want to chase this. Sometimes you can create a death where there is no death,
Wow.
and you can do that by refusing to live based off of the consequences that you find yourself in life. We know the
Yeah.
word tells us whatever state we find ourselves in to be content in that state, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if if you find out, well, hey, he passed away when I was born, even though you have these other relationships, you could go through life with the why me, or why don't I have a dad? Because as you grow up, they're gonna be father-daughter dances. They're gonna be
Yeah.
whatever you were into in school, what if there was a recital,
Yep.
if it's a hey, when it's time to start dating, who's the guy coming to ask, can he take his daughter to all of these different things, all of these life moments. So
Yep.
you can start your life off, you can start your life off um, in a dying situation. And I believe that is a group of people, depending on what information you allow to govern your life. In other words, uh, like I said,
That's
death
good.
death is a natural part of life. Man, that is so unfortunate. Your dad passing away before you were even born. But this is how
Mm-hmm.
you have to look at it. I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful because God said He knew me before I was even formed in my mother's womb. Your story
Yes.
gives so much credence to that. God knew that your dad was not going to be alive to be here to walk your earthly walk with you. But yet, God said, because of purpose, you still had to come forth, Victoria.
Woo.
So when
And I
people, I'm just telling you. So if you listening today, I want you, all of these markers that you put on the wall, that you put on your life, that you use as crutches to say, why me and why that, take every single one of those markers down. After this, after hearing this,
Mhm.
God says, I'm still the father to the fatherless.
My.
Now, she had to make a father. God being a major piece of the puzzle, there are earthly relationships that she had to put. In other words, I want to have a daddy, and I'm going to do whatever I have to do to get that daddy. That's what I heard when
Mhm.
you said that. And so, if
Yeah.
you're watching now, if you started life off with a death, I'm going to ask you to have a funeral. And I
Mm.
want you to bury those ideologies. I want you to bury those habits. I want you to bury all of those feelings with that. And what I want you to do, I want you to say a eulogy over it. I want you to put that casket in the ground, cover up,
Ooh.
and never go back to it again. Why? Because as you can see, there is somebody. out there, where there's got to be a surrogate father that's not even in your family. God says you are so important. God, you can't be this important that God says, I know you before you were formed in your mother's womb. You get here, okay, maybe you don't have either one of your parents, but you better
Mhm.
know because you showed up, God has provisions for you. So I'm asking you to
Amen.
take off whatever vision that you have, whether it's blurred or whether your eyes are closed, whatever you need to do, you need to get a new vision. You that is so powerful what you just shared, Victoria, because it speaks to a group of people who are going through life, right, at a
Mhm.
negative.
Yeah.
They're saying in their heart, I want to have all these positive things, but you see life as a at a negative in a negative viewfinder, and that's
Mhm.
tough. You already have some things you got to fight. Don't give yourself extra weight to have to fight. But I just applaud you for your. Well, let me applaud your family. Let me applaud your family.
Mhm.
that's powerful. They're gonna make sure, okay, her dad's not here. All of us are gonna have to pitch in to be that her daddy would have been to her. So I didn't want to let that pass without saying something about it. So hopefully someone that's watching, um, do not let the past beat you down like that. You cannot. You're functioning as half a man or half a woman. If you have a
Mhm.
family, your family needs to hold you.
Yes.
Let God
Yes.
heal you. Let him heal you. I don't care if you're 16 or I don't care if you're 96. Today is your day of reconciliation. Be healed. Like, let's just put it to bed. Let's move on. You still are alive, right? So we're saying life after death. This is a death before life even gets started. And I
Woo.
I didn't even see that coming. I didn't even see that coming. That's
I
why I
forgot
love
I didn't share that to you. Once I started
no.
talking, I was like, let me go back to the beginning.
No, we need thank you for doing that because I know the listeners, for me, it's about helping people, right? And we have a myriad of viewers and watchers. So this is going to be good for someone. You've been
Mhm.
holding on to what you thought was true. And now hearing this, man, that has not been good for me, right?
Mhm.
So move forward and heal, right?
Yes.
I want to read the scripture and then I'm going to throw it back to you, Victoria. Ecclesiastics chapter 3, verses 1 through 2. It says, To everything, there is a season,
Mm.
a time to be born, a time to die, a time to weep, and a time to laugh, a time to mourn, and a time to dance. My prayer after this series is done, I pray that laughter will break forth and I pray that the dancing will begin. We've had enough weeping, we've had enough mourning. It's time for you to experience the other part of it or the other side of it.
Yes.
And the times
Yes.
I've talked to you, Victoria, nothing about you comes across as being sad or, woe is me, woe my little self. You see the glass half full. And you are living life um, on top of things. And I like that. I like that. I like that. And sure, things happen. We know. We
Mhm.
know. When I talked to you, I forgot we were working on something. I can't remember at this point, but when I reached out to you, you was like, "Oh man, my grandfather passed away." I'm like, "Oh wow."
Oh yeah, the website when we were
Yeah,
kind of
that's what it
talking
was.
about some future.
That's right.
Not even in. It was the last week of December, or the last couple weeks of December.
That's exactly
Cause
what it was. The
yeah.
website. Thank you. So, and you was like, okay, my grandfather, he passed away. And so obviously, for me, it's life and family is just, that's always at the top of the list. So obviously, whatever we were talking about working on, we throw that on the shelf and it's like, hey, we praying for you. Um, you know, if you need anything, we'll be here to encourage you. I want you to talk about um, your grandfather because obviously he represents a patriarch in your family,
Hmm.
and I know what it's like to go through um, that, and I think it would be good for you to tell your story and share how you use the lens of the glass being half full to get you through that loss. Share with the viewer and the listener, like how do you do that? How did you get through it? What was your approach to that?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a loaded, so put your seatbelt on. I'll try to go in logical order though.
Okay.
Um, so Billy Joe Garrett Sr. passed away in December. We were still healing from the death of his wife. They were married for 60 plus years.
Mm,
Irma D. Irma D. She COVID, got to her. She had COVID pneumonia, and she was the matriarch. Like she, Papa was in charge, but Irma was, she took care of everybody. She took care of him. So, all the grandkids are like, ooh, who is Billy Joe without Irma D? Like, and seeing him on his decline, being more frail and, versus seeing the Pawpaw years ago who had a horse and he always had some money in his pocket to give to you and always had a smile. I know every time I saw him. And now that I'm 35, I'm like, I wonder if I reminded him of my dad. Like whenever he saw me, was he like, man, like that's what he left me, and I was the only girl. Like my dad had two sons. And then when I came, I was the girl. And so, he passed away in December. And it was almost like a closure of a chapter because I always knew that my dad passed away when I was a little girl. That was part of my story. Like when I was 6 and 7, mom used to have to tell me, stop telling people your daddy not, I would be like, oh, my daddy, he died. I would just say that, not knowing, not having emotion behind it. Just that's a fact of my life. And
right.
I've carried that with me, not necessarily having any emotion towards it until I got older. When grandfather passed away, I posted on Facebook that, please send prayers. My last living grandparent, is gone. And it didn't hit me until I typed that out. That's my last living grandparent. So in my mind, I see like a line, a stairway to heaven, I guess, of life, the lifeline. And I see myself. And then I saw my grandparents, my mom and then my grandparents. I'm like, I'm moving up in that line. I'm 35, I have a kid, but like it's a mindset thing because in my mind, I'm a grandbaby. I am the grandbaby. Like I'm not responsible for, calling people when people die or putting stuff together, like all those things that keep your family going and keep you connected, that your grandparents and your mom and their mom, that they worked so hard to do. You don't realize how much work it goes into keeping a family together and connected. And in these times, in these times with social media, it's even, I feel like it's even harder because I feel like there's more distractions at your fingertips. It's easy to forget to call your auntie or your cousin because, oh, I seen them on Facebook. You didn't see them. You saw a post that they made, so those connections aren't as strong and as tight, in my opinion. And it may be just my family or it may not be every family, but for the most part. And so I'm thinking like, wow, I have a lot going on in my life. How do I do what grandma did and papa did and all those people before us did to keep the family together? What is my role in that? How much do I want to take on? And what are the consequences if I don't take on those responsibilities? So that's kind of where I am now because it's still fresh. As you can see, when I was talking about, I was wiping away tears, but I wasn't sad. They just kind of were flowing as I talked, very cleansing. I'm not sad about it because I know the story and I know how it ends for all of us, and I have that faith. But in the meantime, what do I do now? Before he cracks the sky and before, the king, all of that, there's still work that has to be done here on earth with our family. Our family is our first social setting where we learn life. So I just think with the passing of my grandfather, it just signified a time in my life where I have to consider the legacy and where I stand in the receiving of and passing on of that baton. So,
Good stuff. Listen, you did a great job of articulating that, and I want to sum it up in one word. When I heard you speak just now, you have you have embraced the weight of this word, responsibility.
mhm,
Um, when you begin to talk about how when you look up, you said it's your mom, and
mhm,
then it's you're the grandbaby,
mhm,
and you begin to talk about the responsibility of the family. You begin to talk about what it takes to keep a family together. I hear responsibility, and that's what I want to motivate whomever you are, whether you've experienced loss, whether it was yesterday, a year ago, 20 years ago, there's a responsibility to live life that is so precedented, like it's so important. um, that's why having like this conversation is important. Sure, and I'll keep saying it. Go through the grieving process. We were talking, you saw her wiping tears away, and obviously she's still going through the grieving process, but you heard her. She's not sad in that in those terms, but she is hurt. When you lose,
yeah.
especially when trust me, I know when you lose Papa, when you lose mother, all of man,
Medea, Big Mama,
Big
all
Mama,
of
whoever.
it.
I'm telling you right now, there it's a pain. I know what my grandparents, what they meant to me, what they meant to our family, and just to me personally. So I feel that, but you got to get back to life. You got to get back to life. Do you realize when your grandfather and your grandmother passed away? I don't know who in your family assumed those roles, but somebody had to assume those roles. If the family is going to stay the course, and if there's going to be a family legacy,
That's true.
somebody has to
It,
put their hands on the plow and continue what God has already started. And so, um, if you have a prolonged grieving process, just from that standpoint, there will begin to be an erosion of those values, principles,
yeah.
and we see it in our families, we see it in our communities. Nobody wants to
Yes,
talk about it,
we
but
see
that's
it in
what's
our
happening.
community.
We see it every day, all day. So it was four things I wanted to talk about. You've already touched two of them. The first thing is allowing yourself to grieve. I can tell that you're watching. I can hear you. You are, and you still are allowing yourself to grieve. But how are you doing it? By getting back to life.
Mhm.
Now, I
Yeah.
do understand it's easier for some than others, right? So I'm not telling you that you have to do exactly what Victoria is doing, but that is a pretty good model of it. That's what it can look like, right? And
Yeah.
I trust me, I know she's been having some tough moments, right? But life doesn't stop. The other thing you have to do is express your feelings. There's so many watching, they haven't expressed their feelings. They're walking around, it's almost like a time bomb. Even if the death has made you mad, you need to express it in in a safe and a loving way. I'm not saying you get the vomit
Yeah.
on everybody and go off and have these tangents. That's not it. That's not it. Not like that.
Mhm.
But you do need to have an outlet to express it. Express when you express it, it's a release that comes with that, right?
Yeah.
You're walking around. I promise you, I guarantee you, your sleep is off, right? If you're
Yep.
working, that career, it's not what it used to be. Oh God, especially this one. If you're married to somebody, that relationship is suffering. If you're a mother or father and you have kids, those relationships are suffering. And then if you're just a
Mhm.
sister or auntie, the family they want you back. But part
Yeah.
of it the grieving portion of it, because you have not properly done it, you don't even
Mhm.
realize. And in your mind, you're thinking everything is normal, but everybody outside can see it. Right.
Mhm.
So it's important to do these things. It's very, 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 very important to do those things. I want to say something else about something you said about in your family. Um the day of, having grandma and papa, the way we know, those days have changed. Grandmothers now are like in their early 40s.
Yeah.
Papa is like 42, 43, 44.
Mhm.
My my grandparents, they were in their 60s when they were grandparents.
Wow.
At that, state in 50s, 60s, right? The 50s and
Mhm.
60s. So now you have a different dynamic, right? And you
Yeah.
understand, man, in your 30s and your 40s, you're going through transitions as an adult.
Mhm.
And now you find yourself as being a grandfather and a grandmother. And so that's a different dynamic than what our grandparents, had to go through. And so
Yeah.
I know you're trying to find your footing and trying to understand, how do I embrace this weight? One of the ways to do it is look at what's already been done, look at
Yes.
what you can do to remain, I mean, to keep that family portion or that family legacy alive. But then I'm going to also encourage you to adopt and add some new functions or some new ways of doing things so that the family can survive. And what do I mean by it? Grandma and grandpa may have done it this way and it worked for them. It may not work for you that way, right? So just
Mhm.
using this as an example, your mom says she's the one that's stepping in now. Whereas grandma, she was hands on. She touched everybody. That thing you said, your papa, every time you saw him, he was smiling, had that money in his pocket. He gonna bless all the grandkids. You
Mhm.
maybe, I maybe can't function that way.
Yeah.
And this is what it looks like now. I can start a group chat though. I can a group text. I can text everybody, or maybe
Yes.
we can all get a free a free conference call phone number. We can all call in, laugh, and talk. Because obviously we are in the pandemic, so that I get that factor. My thing is
Mhm.
this: I'm throwing out things to get you to think of different ways to one come out of the grieving, but then as a family unit, how do we keep it? Because families are suffering. Think about it. You get this
Mhm.
family member that's grieving, they shut down. Then you get this family member, they're grieving, they shut down. Then this family member over here is grieving. Before you know it, and then don't have a few deaths in a short period of time. You haven't
Yes.
even grieved the other one for 3 years ago. Now we have two in 1 year. I
Yeah.
remember one year we had four deaths, four major deaths. I don't know how we made it as a family. I'll
Mhm.
never forget that year. It was the worst year for our family ever. Four, no, three. I'm sorry. It was three major deaths. I was
Wow.
in college. I don't know how we made it. Well, except it was the Lord that was on our side. I
Yes.
don't I don't ever want to go through that again. So like I said, I'll keep saying it. We understand, man, when death happens, it's tough, but you got to get back to life and you got to get back to living.
Yes.
Um, what are you thinking, sis? I see your thought
I'm just
process.
I'm a crackpot, so I'm taking everything and that you're saying and making connections and but you caught me when you said doing it in a different way because there is God is doing a new thing, and it's the same God. I was listening to a song and the young lady yesterday. She said, "The God of the old is the God of the new," and I was like, "Yes, He is." So He's unchangeable, and He's the same God that Grandma talked to. Whether I could pray through a group text, and actually, my mom started a group chat a couple weeks ago. Is when you said that, I was like, wow, and that's how we've been able. And I was just talking to my little baby cousin lives in Hawaii. She's in the Navy, and she feels disconnected because she's all the way down here and things are happening. And if something happens, she can't get. So she was panicking last night. We were talking about something. She's like, but if something happens, I can't get down there. Well, my mom, we were talking about how we appreciate that my mom started that group text because we do daily morning check-ins now. Like we send each other selfies, like of each other, like going to work, drinking our coffee throughout our day. Whether we didn't have that before, and we were very distant. And we talked about this last holiday season. We were all in our own cities, like not even. We didn't even try to put anything together. Like where they do that at? Like my grandmother, and we always had something even with COVID going on. COVID's better now, so it wasn't because of that. We eliminate. That's not why we didn't. So I think my mom was like, okay, we have to do something because we are not going down like that. My mom, my grandmother on my mom's side, she would not be having that. So doing it in a new way. We also have a family conference thing on Facebook, and it's called Weathering the Storm. My family made it during the freeze when we had that freeze in Houston, and they renamed the group to Weathering the Storm. And it's my grandmother's sister. She's my great great grandmother, my great great aunt. She's like 86, 87. She hops on. It's like one person can call, and everybody gets the ring, and they talk. Now I can't participate all the time because these ladies, they're retired and they talk all day. But
Oh
just
my.
to be in the number, like
Right.
I get the call. I may not be able to hop on, but when I want to hop on, I can. I can scroll and see the pictures that they're posting and read the things that they're talking about, and I feel connected. So when you said that, we do have to reimagine how to save our family. It doesn't. It's not the way our grandparents did it. It was their response to their circumstances. So what's our response to our circumstances and in our circumstances with the tools that we have, with the
Mm.
knowledge now that we have, because we've evolved. We know more, we do. We know more, whether it be discipline or certain values, certain things, we're evolving. Your family should be evolving, hopefully, on an upward trajectory. So,
That word evolve. And I said that I was going to um, write down her quote. We did it in, I think, the first episode. She had an acronym for life. And the last letter was evolve.
mm,
I can't remember. If she's watching this, shout out JB. I'm going to use your word. I can't remember the rest of your acronym, but the end of it is evolve. We have to evolve. When there's been a death like that, you got to evolve back to living.
mhm,
Evolve, evolve. Um, I want to ask you some questions now, and these are just general. It may not be pertinent to your family or to you, but just um, from your perspective when you talk about death, because one of the things we also have the unique assignment of doing is, um, I've done my fair share of funerals. Um, you've, I can attest to do the same thing. And
mhm,
obviously, it's about the family, just being a comfort to them, to strengthen them and lift them up. We all know the day of the funeral, right? And whether it was awake and all of those other things. But when you begin to think about when the phone call stopped, um, all that good food people are bringing, it stops.
mhm,
All the visitation stops, and you are alone to process what's happening. Let's talk about what are some initial things that you can do to help keep your sanity during those times. And so I'm always be guilty of giving my perspective from my faith. That's just my life. But I do understand there are some that watch that may not have our faith the way we do. What are some just practical things we can do that will lead us to moving us out of this place of wanting to just be stagnant and just stop living. Like some, give me some things that we can do, or
Mhm.
some processes that we can do that'll help us, just on an everyday basis.
I know for me, and everyone's different, um, but sometimes we want to like, especially like people, if you're around somebody who lost somebody, like you don't know, should I talk about it? Should I not talk about it? Bring it up. Um, it's okay to surround yourself with things that remind you of that person. And I
Mm,
say this like because sometimes we feel like we have to like just shut it all the way off, not think about them and not no, they lived, right? They lived and you were a part of their life. They were a part of your life. So now you're an extension of your life. They imparted something in you because if they didn't, you wouldn't be grieving the way you are. They affected you, they impacted you. They stored some gifts inside of you. They stored some insights. They stored some encouragement. So I think about my actions sometimes in the terms of my grandmother. Oh, my grandmother would have loved that. Or my grandmother would, I'm working on my master's right now and I graduate in May and she was big on education and was so proud that her grandbaby, she graduated. So when I do things like that and when I go for continuing goals, like I can't stop dreaming and stop going to school and doing things like that. So I do it. And then I think I live in the joy that I know my grandmother would have been feeling if she lived, if she were to see me cross that stage. When I had my son, my mom's mom, and this is Vera, my grandmother. This is
oh
her
wow,
obituary. Yeah, this is my grandmother, beautiful lady. And
incredible.
when we look at my son Jackson, he would have been the great grand, the first great grand, and like, oh, he would have been so spoiled, just because how just remembering what she did for us and how
Hmm.
her love for kids, you know, think about the things that they love and enjoy those things. My grandmother loved the Lord. I wish she could see me leading worship right now. Like she passed away before I started doing it kind of professionally, I guess you could say. Um, when I'm up there worshiping, I feel her. Like I feel her being proud of what I'm doing. So those are some practical ways that I uh, process. Like when I pass up horses, my grandfather had a horse, and I was a city girl. He was a country boy. So whenever I would talk to him, he just amazed. He had a guitar and horses. So when I see country things, whether it's in a store, it could be like a little cowboy. It reminds me of a pleasant memory of my grandfather, and it's not sad. It's very nostalgic. So think about those things, you know.
I love it. I love it. That's exactly where I'm going with it, because um, you have to find the life in the relationship and use those things to let it motivate you. Because when people you love and you care about, like you were going through, you were just saying how, if she was alive, your son would be spoiled. Wouldn't even be a word. It would
A
just be
hot
low. It
mess.
Yes, it would just be. I tell I tell my son and my daughter that if my grandmother was still alive, it's like I know first off I would definitely get replaced, and they would be. I don't even know what word to call it, because I mean you're
Yeah.
not gonna be the boss of her. Whatever she say is gonna go. I probably wouldn't be able to whoop nothing. She would shut all of
Mm-mm.
that down, right? And so what I do was I said, okay, I'm gonna make sure that they still live in every day and be part of my life every day. So I take different parts of them and I implement it into my life. That gave me the strength to move on, right?
Yes.
Like my mom, I laugh at myself every day. I find myself saying something she said or doing something she would have done, and I just get tickled. And so I know now that I have become my mother. I know I have become my grandfather. I know I become my grandmother, and I embrace it fully. It's
Mm-hmm.
like it's a salve, if you will, a healing
Yeah.
salve. Now it's been some time now, and I'm definitely healed from all of those losses, right? But For somebody who hadn't necessarily had that walk, these are some of the things you can do to help get you through it. Don't allow, even though they died, don't allow them to die. Keep the memories alive. Keep the principles of what they taught you. Find ways to get life out of it. Another thing that because I'm really I'm in this thing knee deep now. I'm going to ask you, if you're looking for something to do that's going to be therapy to you, take your thoughts and write them down. I'm not saying you're going to write a book or you're going to be an author or have a podcast like this. Begin to write those thoughts down. You'll be amazed at what will come up out of you just in your thoughts. And I'm telling you, it's great therapy to write it. It's power when you put ink to paper. You write it. Well, it says write the vision, make it plain, write
Make
it.
it plain.
Right. When you write what's on the inside of you and you go back and you rehearse it and you read it. It's something about it that it has a way of moving us like anything greater than anybody else can say to us, right?
Yes,
And then the
yes,
other
yes,
thing I
yes.
want to tell you is I want you to look for the joy in it. God promises us joy. In Revelation 21:4, it says, God shall wipe away all the tears from your
Stop
eyes.
it. Look, I don't know if you can see this. I have my Bible app open.
Oh,
What do you
wow.
see?
Stop.
Revelation 21. I had it.
Oh,
I was
man.
like, that
Oh,
was where I
wow.
was going with it.
Yeah.
Look at God.
Yeah. He said, because there's going to be a day where there should be no more death, neither sorrow, neither crying, neither shall there be any more pain. For the former things are passed away. I promise you, this scripture had to, this scripture had to become life for me. I said, okay, God, you say you're gonna wipe every tear away from my eyes. I don't have no other place but to believe it, right? And he's been faithful to do it. He's been faithful to do it. And I said, okay, you've been faithful to do your part, then I have a part to do, right? So I have to be engaged. He's going to do his part. I promise you. He's not, he's going to
Will.
hold up his end of the bargain.
Yes.
The question is, will you hold up your end of
Will
the bargain?
you?
And your
Yeah.
end of the bargain is to engage in what he's already given. So that was
Yes.
good. So we look, we girl, we sync, we syncopated, we connected.
Man, I was like,
The
cause
fact that you
that
had that scripture ready to go. So
ready to go. I was
um
like, let's go.
I think that's really good. Now I wanna turn this table all the way over now. I want to
Okay.
flip the table. I still want to talk about death and loss, but I want to move away from talking about people and like what does it look like when things die in your life? Like during this pandemic, there are some people who were laid off from work and they have not went back. That's a death. Like how do you make the adjustment? There are some people who were married or in relationships, whether it be a marital relationship, a business relationship. There are some ministry relationships. I experienced that. We were in the ministry. We didn't even know COVID was coming, but our ministry closed. It was like a death. It was like losing a family member. It took me that whole year just to grieve that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was
Oh.
it was it was tough. On top of the pandemic and everything that was going on, I'm just telling. It's I know people are dealing with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, um, how do you how do you get the life back? You had a
Yeah.
dream of opening your coffee shop. The pandemic hit. Now you can't do it. Like, how do you
Mm-hmm.
get back to life and all of these different areas? Because it's more than just a physical death. There are things that die.
Yeah.
You, your will just to go forward, it just dies. How do you get back to life?
Right. How do you?
How do you come back from it, right?
Yeah.
How do you come back from it? And I'm asking the question, but I want to give an answer, and then I want you to chime in, Victoria.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the first thing that you have to do in order before you able to rebound, one of the reasons you find yourself in the funk because there is, okay, we got visitors. Okay. One of the reasons you find yourself dealing with it is, oh man, I know, here I go. There can be there can be systems in your life that are dysfunctional. And
Ooh.
and what I mean by it is you necessarily won't know that there's some dysfunction until you go through something as tragic as that, as a loss.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that loss has a way of exposing and shining a light on the dysfunction. Because trust me, during this pandemic, and I know my wife is good with me saying this, but we realized that there were some things she needed to work on. I definitely need to work on, and my kids need to work on because we were together every day, every
Hmm.
day, all day. And I'm going to do something if something don't
Hmm.
change. You
Stuff
know,
don't change.
now, right now, let me say this. I was getting out of the house because I was declared an essential worker. So I was going to work still every day. But then I began to think about my wife. They, just the three of them, they all together 24 hours, 7 days a week. And then they were doing school. It was just like, oh Lord, what can I do
Mhm.
to help relieve this pressure?
Right.
Because we begin to all see different sides of each other that I'm like, oh my Lord, I didn't know that. Oh my God, I didn't know that.
Hmm.
So this pandemic, it exposed some things. So when I say dysfunction, don't feel bad. Don't feel like, oh, here I go. No, no, no.
No.
It's good that it was exposed
Yes.
because when things that matter like that, like you got, okay, I got to get rid of this dysfunction so I can get back to living. So talk to us, Victoria.
Hmm.
When
Hmm.
you think of that, this, I'm serious, the pandemic has showed us many things.
Yes, it
So
has.
what is it that you're learning and what is it that you're growing? How are you growing
Hmm.
through these some of these death situations?
Yeah. Um, death death of other things, it's almost relative because we all know that all of us have an expiration date. And so when things like that happen, it reminds you, you start looking at your position in death. Like, how far am I from it? How close am I to it? Is it in front of me, behind me, on, like, and have I done everything that I've been called to do? Have I lived the life that, and for me, dysfunction is if I'm not on that trajectory, something is dysfunctional because it's not in the will of God. And this is me now answering from my Christian perspective. Then I'm
Great.
gonna also give like a more, I guess, general perspective of it too. But as a Christian, I do not want to be buried with these gifts inside. From an early age, I knew, and if you really think about it, when you're little, you know what, you kind of have a feeling of what you were called to do. I can remember wanting to be a teacher as a young kid or wanting to be a singer. Those things I naturally gravitated towards. So I had to go back in my mind during the pandemic, like, what are those things that I naturally gravitated towards as a kid? And what do they look like now? And what have I done with those things that God has given me? So I don't want to die. I want to die empty. Like, I want to
Absolutely.
have given it all out. And I know I hadn't. So when the pandemic happened, on top of the deaths and the tragedies and the different things, it made me think about where I was in relationship to proximity to my expiration date and how full I still was. Like, I
Mhm.
knew I had never written a book, and I always said I was
Mm,
going to. God called me to do that. I knew I
right.
hadn't really, I shy away from singing engagements because I feel, I don't know, not up to par as the next worship leader or whatever the things that you have to sit and really kind of like deal with because you can't go anywhere. You're stuck in, like
Mhm.
you said, every day. You have to turn the negatives into positives. You have to, or you
Mhm.
will be stuck there. So basically, just thinking like, what are the barriers that have gotten in the way from me doing this thus far in my life? These are things I know I've been called to do. So now I'm in the season. I was telling one of my girlfriends this yesterday. I feel like I'm in a season of addressing the barriers that have caused the dysfunction. Because if anybody knows your dysfunction, it's your family. So like you said, they get the real true you. You know, your 5-year-old is gonna let you, Mama, why you always leaving your stuff around? Like if it's disorganization or whatever, they gonna call you out on it, or they see it and you know they see it. You better not talk to nobody about that. But you know, like that type of
gosh, yes.
So
yeah.
Trying to birth something new. You can't birth something new using the old habits and the old ways of thinking. There may be some broken systems, like you said, that needs to be addressed. And this is a good time especially when you're dealing with the death of a thing, of a relationship. Look at that relationship. Look at that thing, that church, that ministry, that job. Think about what worked, and then think about what didn't work. Think about where you want to be and where you truly are. You have to be so honest with yourself. Like we try to lie to God and we try to lie to ourselves about where we really stand on some things. You have to be so transparent with yourself and with the people around you eventually, because it's tough to be transparent. But like I said earlier, your family knows. The people that live in your house with you, they know the real you, and they know the things that you struggle with. And so that's one place to start. Start with your family. Like, hey, babe, can you help? Like, this is my goal, right? And you know my goal for years. Why can't I break loose? You know, she might be able to tell you some things that you don't want to hear, but it will help you rise up, Lazarus, and go walk forward.
Ooh, that's good stuff right there. Yeah. Oh man, that's priceless. That is priceless. I mean, you spot on. You are spot on. But listen, that's what happens though, because we've been, like I said, death. It exposed that dysfunction, but this is the problem. We're getting our feelings about it.